lashing out with plasma beams that could liquefy continents. But those beams struck an unseen barrier, scattering like rain against a mountain, their fury rendered meaningless in the face of human engineering. And then, with the silence of inevitability, the human dreadnought answered. One strike, just one, lanced out, a beam so white-hot it seemed to split existence itself, and the Dominion's proud battlecruiser was simply gone, not shattered, not crippled, but erased, unmade in a heartbeat as if it had never been. Panic surged across the fleet, corvettes scattering like frightened insects, carriers launching interceptors in desperate waves, but their weapons found no purchase. Their formations crumbled before the calm precision of human retaliation, and one by one, ships that had carried the arrogance of empires for centuries became wreckage, drifting husks spinning into the void. On every world within sensor range, Dominion citizens who had once laughed at the myth of humanity now stared at live feeds with silent horror, their laughter curdling into screams as they realized the punchline had turned to prophecy, and that prophecy was death. Yet even in the slaughter there was restraint. The dreadnought did not pursue every fragment, did not obliterate every survivor. It destroyed enough to prove supremacy, enough to carve terror into memory, enough to brand a single truth across the stars. Humans had returned, and they had never been gone. Whispers spread faster than light, leaping from system to system, from merchant barge to pirate den to imperial court, and everywhere the tale was the same. The myth had woken, the humans were real, and their power was beyond comprehension. In the aftermath, as the wreckage of once proud Dominion ships floated like offerings around the dreadnought, alien senators debated in trembling voices whether to sue for peace, to hide, or to prepare for annihilation. But none dared to speak the old jokes anymore. None dared to laugh at the stories told in half-forgotten archives, because now those stories walked the void once more. And as the human dreadnought turned, fatting again into distortion, leaving behind a scar that would never heal, one chilling certainty remained, carried in whispers across the galaxy. The myths were real, and they had teeth. In the vast stretches of the galaxy, far from the borders of the known and into the deep, unknowable dark, the ancient, proud species of the Irith held a place of supreme arrogance. For centuries, they had been the dominant force, their fleets unfurled across star systems, their power unchallenged. The Irith had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations, their histories etched in crystalline archives, their ancient data records pristine with the achievements of those who came before. And yet within the archives there was one entry that they had long since dismissed, the myth of the humans. It was nothing more than a whisper, a shadow of an old story spoken in the corners of forgotten archives. To the Irith, the notion of humans was little more than a relic, an absurd tale told by the most senior historians, more fantasy than fact, more ancient joke than threat. The idea that a primitive species, one that had once struggled with fires and dirt, had ascended to anything beyond myth was laughable. They scoffed at the mention of their name in academies during war councils and over long dinner discussions. The humans, a legend, a fragment of ancient fiction, they would say, chuckling to themselves. How could a race so raw, so unrefined, ever rise to become more than a footnote in galactic history? They were a story for children, a myth to be forgotten. But even legends, however frivolous they may seem, can turn into reality. It started with the slightest anomaly, a ghost signal, a faint ripple through the fabric of space that should not have been there. A whisper, barely more than an echo, something that 100 other species would have ignored in their pursuit of greater matters. But the Irith, ever cautious, took notice. The signal was almost imperceptible, distorted beyond recognition. At first, they dismissed it, a glitch in their scanning system, a stray signal from an unknown source, or maybe just cosmic interference. But the frequency lingered, persistent in its quiet presence, drawing the attention of their finest scouts. When a fleet of exploration ships ventured to the coordinates, expecting nothing more than a routine investigation of some forgotten celestial anomaly, they found nothing. The void was empty, cold, untouched. Yet in the distance, almost imperceptible to their sensors, there was a signature. It was subtle, like the shadow of a distant star, but unmistakably foreign. The Irith pressed forward with all the arrogance of their kind, confident that whatever it was, it could be ignored, easily overcome, or dismissed as another dead end. But the closer they came, the stranger it became. The signal intensified, a hum that reverberated through the depths of space. No one could identify it. It was familiar and yet not familiar at all. The Irith fleet slowed and uncertainty began to creep in. They had encountered uncharted systems before, anomalies and patterns that defied their understanding. But this was different. It wasn't a natural phenomenon. It wasn't a distant echo of cosmic history. No, this was a deliberate signal, a deliberate presence in the darkness. It was a deliberate invitation. And then, as the lead scout ship breached the final veil of mystery, it appeared. A dreadnought vast beyond measure, its silhouette swallowing entire constellations. The Irith froze. Their scouts, the brave and the bold, felt a chill unlike anything they'd ever experienced. This was no ordinary ship. This was something more, something ancient, something filled with purpose. But the true shock came when the signature finally resolved into clarity. It wasn't just one ship. It was a fleet. A whole armada, massive beyond anything they could have imagined, concealed beneath an ancient cloak. The size, the sheer scale of it was beyond their capacity to measure. This wasn't a skirmish fleet, a vanguard of a forgotten species. No, this was a war machine, a harbinger of something far more terrifying. And then came the name. The humans. The legends had come to life. The silence in the Irith command center was deafening. Not a single voice dared to speak for a long, agonizing moment. The mockery they had once hurled at the myth of the humans seemed to twist into the hollowest of sounds, echoing in their ears like the last remnants of a doomed civilization. The arrogance that had filled their halls vanished, replaced by a sense of dread too vast to understand. The fleet of the humans, for all their disbelieving eyes, was real. They were real. The very story they had mocked for generations had suddenly become a terrifying truth. It wasn't just that the humans had arrived. It was the way they had arrived. Their ships, sleek and formidable, emerged from the void like specters of a forgotten past, the design of their vessels suggesting a sophistication that belied their supposed primitive origins. The Irith had expected to meet a race of squabbling, primitive beings, helpless in the face of true power. What they had found, instead, was a species that had learned to bend the very laws of space and time to their will. As the Irith stared at the imposing sight of the dreadnoughts, a slow realization washed over them. They had underestimated the humans, and they had done so gravely. The humans' arrival rewrote everything. It was as if the galaxy itself had shifted its axis, casting aside millennia of arrogance and old assumptions in favor of an unsettling truth. The first human ships began to decloak in perfect synchronization, their immense size dwarfing everything around them. The Irith commanders could hardly comprehend what they were seeing. It was as if they had been watching ghosts in the dark for millennia, and now the specters were real, more terrifying than they could have ever imagined. The humans did not come as beggars for peace or petitioners for understanding. They came as conquerors, as victors who had finally arrived to take their place among the stars where they had always belonged. There was no plea for mercy, no request for a negotiation. The humans simply arrived. Their first words, broadcasted across all frequencies, reverberated through the Irith fleet like thunder, shaking every vessel to its core. "We are humanity, and we have come to take what is ours." The voice, deep and unwavering, carried an undeniable weight of command, a promise that echoed across the entire galaxy. The Irith fleet responded too late, their weapons firing in a panic, but the humans were already in control. Their technology, their ships, their weapons, everything was superior. The humans didn't have to fire a single shot to break the spirit of their enemies. The very presence of their dreadnoughts was enough to cripple the Irith's once unshakable confidence. In the halls of their Grand Senate, once filled with boastful debates and jests about the old human myth, the Irith now faced the stark reality of their hubris. The humans had shattered their illusions, their myths,